This is a production of WGBH2 Boston.
Tonight on Greater Boston, Super Tuesday, the sequel. Donald Trump wins big and gives a victory speech that sounds like a sales pitch on the Home Shopping Network. And Sanders proves polling is not a science with his shocking win in Michigan. Was it an aberration or a harbinger? Plus, the great Al Kooper. He founded Blood, Sweat, and Tears, performer of the Rolling Stones, B.B. King, The Who, virtually everyone, and by accident played the most famous organ riff ever on the #1 song of all time. He joins me. Then later, Canada's Prime Minister is coming to the U.S. with a message some of you won't like, but I do. You know, last night when we were talking about what to do on today's show, we were on the fence about whether we should be talking politics again. We ended up putting off the decision until we saw last night's primary results, but around 9:30, the decision was pretty much made for us, thanks to this.
I can be more presidential if I want to be. I can be more presidential than anybody. See, hostility works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. There has never been more money spent on hitting somebody than was spent on me. I have Trump International, the Bank of America building, a big chunk of it in San Francisco, 1290 Avenue there, many, many things. Well, there's the water company. I mean, we sell water, and we have water, and it's a very successful Trump Steaks. Where are the steaks? Do we have steaks? We have Trump Steaks. We have Trump Magazine, Trump Airline. Well, I sold the airline, and I actually made a great deal. Trump University, we're holding it. When I win the lawsuit, which I'll win. And by the way, the winery, you see the wine, because he mentioned Trump vodka. It's the largest winery on the East Coast. I own it 100%.
I'm ordering the $1,000 Trump steak and burger combo later tonight. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hillary Clinton did win Mississippi, but Bernie Sanders upset Hillary and the prognosticators in Michigan. Could Sanders really turn the tables? Does the consummate salesman have his race locked up? Joining me are Jack Sullivan. He's from Commonwealth Magazine. Good to see you, Jack.
Jim.
Lauren Dzinski of Politico. Hello, Lauren. And David Scharfenberg from the Boston Globe. Hello to you, David. So my take on, whether you like the content or don't like the guy knows how to work a room, and not just people in the room, but it seems to me the audience better than almost any politician I've ever seen. He stayed there until every single question had been asked and answered. Am I off base here?
You're not. I mean, he's a salesman. He's a deal maker, right? And this is kind of the ultimate deal he wants to make. And there's plenty of sizzle rather than steak in that room. I mean, I don't think he actually has a steak company anymore. I don't think he even has a real water company anymore. But that doesn't matter. Like much that Trump says, it doesn't actually matter what the content of it is. It matters how he sells it, and he sells very well.
And by the way, a lot of that was a response to Mitt Romney, obviously, and his attacks on his business acumen and that sort of stuff. But you can see, I'm not trying to sell Trump, but you can see how he figures out how to connect, can you not?
He is like a remarkable QVC salesman.
No, he is.
It's like he had everyone dialed in, whether they were reporters or anyone else, and he had everyone wrapped around his finger.
So is he unbeatable at this stage? I mean, I saw something today that says in the remaining primaries, he's at roughly 27%, much lower than he's been so far. Cruz, I think, at 25. Rubio, incredibly enough, even though he had nothing yesterday, at 23. Yet it seems to me, other than maybe Rubio winning Florida, which seems not very likely right now, it's essentially his nomination, no?
Well, after I take a sip of my Trump water here, I don't think that he can be beaten. I think he's going in there with the majority of them. And Eric Furst from today in the Globe made a really good point.
Former Romneyite,
that he's going in there from a position of power. He's not going in there to have a brokered convention. He's walking in there with, 70, 80, possibly 90% of the delegates that he needs. And I don't think there's any stopping him.
This whole brokered convention thing, which I'm almost embarrassed to talk about, it's so irresponsible at this stage, this is just fodder for people like us, right? The reality is if a guy who's revolutionized his party, for better or worse, goes in with maybe not 100%, but as Jack says, close, they're not going to try to take it away from him. Are they or are they?
I mean, if they did, there would certainly be such a significant uproar. it seems irresponsible for the party to do that, even though we're talking about Donald Trump.
And a lot of the pundits say, well, the rules allow for it if you don't get the 1237 or whatever it is on the first ballot. But it's not about the pure number. It's about what this guy has brought to the party. There'd be like a revolt in that room.
There would. I mean, I think a lot of the talk these days about the Republican Party split in two is pretty overdone. But if they go to a convention and deny a guy who's, 80, 90% of the way there could be hell to pay.
The rules, but just as a point, everybody's talking about the rules as if, first vote, nobody wins, and okay, it's every man for himself. There's still a commitment of about 47% of the delegates that are committed to who they walked in
based
there
upon
with.
their state's law, not the Republican convention law.
Right. So it's not going to be 100% swing on the second vote.
Well, it's also the assumption, and this is not an original thought. I heard it on CNN last night, so let me steal it. It's like this guy doesn't know how to make a deal. If he's close, the notion is not, well, I'm going to give up and go home and be angry. He's obviously going to try to cut a deal with a cabinet secretary or something.
And there'll always be that threat hanging of the third-party candidacy.
Let's go to the Democratic side for a minute. I think the best line about the Michigan thing last night was actually on Politico. Here's the line. He, meaning Bernie Sanders, had the happily dazed expression of a death row inmate who had just been told he wasn't going to be executed, and who knows, he might even have a shot at getting the warden's job. Does he have a shot at getting the warden's job, even if it turns out in the Rust Belt? Like, we have Illinois this week, and we have Missouri, and then North Carolina, and then even Florida. Is this going to carry over? Is this a one-and-done kind of thing for Sanders?
We're ultimately looking at delegate math here. Sanders won in Michigan yesterday, but he didn't necessarily win all of the delegates.
Proportional. He won just a slight majority.
So, he does have momentum. He has money, so he can continue to give Clinton, a run. But again, can he lock up the delegates to make sure that, he has the nomination?
Yeah. So is there a path for this guy? I mean, we get angry email every day. We say that on the radio when we say there's not. But he would have to win some extraordinary, something like 70% of the remaining delegates to be the nominee.
Yeah, I mean, he'll tell you, and he has said this very thing, that, when he started the campaign, he was at 3%. And
Which he was.
And look how far he's gone. So he says, we're going to continue on this way to an upset. It's long odds. I think the biggest and the most significant thing is he's changed the conversation again.
You see that delegate count? I'm just saying 1221 to 571. It is like a tsunami. But Jack Sullivan, the reason it's a tsunami, as we have learned, is because of the undemocratically chosen superdelegates. Today I read down the list of the Massachusetts superdelegates. About maybe 60% are elected officials who they can vote for whomever they want, mostly Clinton. About 10 of them I never heard of. These are people no one ever heard of who can go and essentially totally thwart the will of the voters of Massachusetts, whether they're for Sanders or Clinton. That's why she's got that huge lead.
Well, they walk around with the big D on their cape, that makes them super delegates. But it's been a part of the process since the very beginning. I mean, everybody knows that the superdelegates are the establishment.
Still undemocratic?
It may be, but that's the democratic selection process, and that's the way that they're going with it. So she's walking in there with them. That's why somebody like Trump would have a hard time in the Democratic process, because the superdelegates are the establishment. They're the ones.
You mean
that,
small D? Oh, you mean if there were superdelegates there? That's a very good point. I was looking. I'm obsessed with exit polls. Well, I don't even know if they're accurate. But the exit polls last night showed a couple of interesting things for Sanders. One, the 80-20 margin on African Americans that Hillary Clinton's had in the South is down to 2-1. It's still significant for her, but 2-1. Much more significantly is this free trade is killing us thing is overwhelming. And it seems to me that even if that's not enough, David, to drive him to the nomination, it's really scary for Hillary Clinton. Because I played a clip 2 nights ago. Trump and Sanders are saying the exact same words about trade deals and China. This is ultimately an issue for her, is it not?
I think it is. And I think this was a reminder that this is, that there are different regions of the country, right? I mean, she was racking up all these wins in the South, and all of a sudden she's the anointed one. And then we said, things are different in Michigan. People have different priorities there, and free trade is a huge, huge issue there. And in a couple of the primaries coming up in the next few weeks.
One last thing here is there's a poll. NBC Wall Street Journal did a poll that I have to say took my breath away today. If we can just pop it up for a minute. Look at this thing. 64% of the people would not vote for Trump. 56% would not vote for the likely, not definite, Democratic nominee. Quickly going down the line, what does that say about the state of democracy in 2016, Jack Sullivan?
It says that 140 characters rule the day because it can define the character of the nominees, and that's what we're looking at right now.
What's it say to you, Lauren?
Still a win for Clinton.
Because she's less disliked than Donald Trump is. How about it, David?
I think it says something about our long-term decline in trust in politicians, but these are two people who are not Barack Obama. I mean, personality matters, and these two personalities are not registering for very different reasons with the American public.
He looks better and better. Do you notice his approval ratings are inching up as this race continues? Jack, it's good to see you.
Jim,
Lauren, enjoy the debate tonight and tomorrow night. David, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for your time. Later, my thoughts on Canada's Prime Minister taking those of us to his south to task and why he's right. But first, to music legend Al Kooper. There's nothing this man hasn't done. He formed the terrific band Blood, Sweat, and Tears, produced one of the top 300 albums of all time, Child is Father to the Man, which included this favorite of mine.
I can't quit her, 'cause in my darkest night you come on like a light. I can't quit her.
Kooper joined me yesterday to talk about life, politics, and how he was responsible by chance for one of the most memorable music moments ever in the song Rolling Stone magazine, rated #1 of all time, Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone. He's the guy playing the organ.
Once upon a time you dressed so fine, threw the bumps of dime in your prime. Then you
Be Still My Heart. The great and wildly versatile Al Kooper joins me now. Al, it's good to see you.
Good to be seen.
Do you mind if I fawn over you for a couple of seconds?
So long as I don't get anything on my jacket.
Fine. So let me just do a brief part of the resume for those who don't know, and I hope they do. So from writing, This Diamond Ring for Gary Lewis and the Playboys, this top 300 album, one of the greatest ever with Blood, Sweat, and Tears. You discovered Lynyrd Skynyrd, Super Session with Steve Stills, Mike Bloomfield. You played with Dylan, Hendrix, Rolling Stones, B.B. King, The Who, George Harrison. You're sort of like Zelig of music, except unlike Woody Allen, you were actually there for all this. Does that even amaze you?
Yes.
That's it?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It caused me to write an autobiography.
Which I read, actually, I want you to know. So I don't know if this is doable. As artist, arranger, player, is there one moment that's seared in your memory when you said, that's when I got it exactly as I wanted it to be?
The watershed moment was when I played on Like a Rolling Stone.
You sick of talking about that?
Yeah.
Okay, can we talk about it for a minute?
Well,
it was an accident, right? You weren't supposed to be playing the organ to begin with. Is that true?
When you said, can we talk about it for a minute, you didn't let me say no.
Well, I know, it's too late for that.
Well, let me just say that I've told this story 4 million times. Everybody watching this show, even if they don't know who I am, knows this story. Plus, there's a movie out directed by Martin Scorsese that has me telling the story quite well.
So you mean I have to tell the story? Is that what you're saying here?
No, but everybody could go watch that Martin Scorsese part. It's in part 2, by the way.
Okay, so while they're waiting to go see the Martin Scorsese film, you're there. Now, come on. You're there to play the guitar. Is that correct?
Please don't do this.
And Mike Bloomfield is there, and you decide Bloomfield is a lot better player than you. Am I right so far?
Yeah, why don't you just tell it?
I'm going to try to tell it.
Don't ask me.
And then do you sneak into the studio to play the organ that is not even your primary instrument?
Yeah.
And
it worked.
But wait a second. When I read this thing all the time, and I've heard you tell it, that you snuck into the studio, how is that? Is that hyperbole or is that real?
Well, as I've said 4 million times, when I was that age, which was 21,
yes,
I had been professional for 7 years, and I was 90% ambition and 10% talent. And that's part of 90% ambition.
Did you improvise when you were doing that thing? I mean, is that, as we've all...
What else could I have done?
Okay, well, fine. For the 4 millionth time, can you tell one other quick story, and then we'll get to something you've told less? You were in Newport at the moment when, at least according to those who were there, the great Bob Dylan was booed for playing that song and playing Electric. Is that hyperbole? Is that an exaggeration of how Dylan's fans treated Dylan that day, or is that real?
It's totally unreal.
So what was real?
What was real is that we were the headliners of the 3 or 4 day festival. And we only played 3 songs and went off stage.
And there was no booing?
people were upset that we only played 3 songs and left.
But it wasn't about the electric part of this?
No.
This is destroying one of the great stories of all time.
Well, you know, I could destroy a lot more if you
Would you
wanted
please?
to talk about things.
Well, here's one for you. I texted another local great musician, Tom Rush, who I know is a buddy of yours, before the show, and he said, ask Al about playing on my second Electra album, quote, about the most fun you can have in a studio without dying or getting arrested. Is that true?
For him.
How about you?
Oh, I've had more fun.
Okay.
But it was very pleasant.
You know, what is amazing, at least to me as a longtime fan of you, is not just who you've played with and what you've done, but the amazing breadth of music that you have played. What is up with that? I mean, there are very few people who've done what you've done who've played so many genres. Do you like it all? Do you have to like it all to do what you've done?
Well, I mean, I began as a guitarist, and I was in that band, the Royal Teens, that had Who Wears Short Shorts.
Who wears short shorts? We wear short shorts.
How do you know that? You were 14 or something?
I was, yeah. And so I did that for about 3 years, and then I became a songwriter, where I was working for a publishing company writing songs. And I did that for many years, and that was a very educational time. I learned a lot of things then, and I learned how to be a better songwriter. And the Gary Lewis thing was a nice thing, and then we had a top 20 thing with Gene Pitney called I Must Be Seeing Things.
I must be seeing things, oh no, it can't be true. I must be hearing things when...
But it was sort of wild to have these people like Keely Smith and Carmen McRae, people record songs that I wrote.
Is being there been enough for you? I mean, you were the front man. I think I hated the second Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Your Blood, Sweat, and Tears I thought was terrific. You were the front guy. You were the star, all that sort of stuff. But
I was the guy that didn't make any money.
Yeah, well, you may not. You know, it made a lot of us happy, though. But you were sort of weaved into the fabric of most of these other things through the years. Does that bother you that you were part of these great moments, but you were not the lead of these great? Are you the kind of person that bothers, or just being part of it big enough for you?
No, I loved it because in the beginning of my career, I had a lot of attention, and my name was around and my face was around. And I didn't like that, it turns out.
Why not?
I just didn't like it.
I've heard that story 4 million times. I don't want to hear that again. No, I'm only kidding. Al, for a minute, can we change gears before you go? You're a Brooklyn kid, right?
Yep.
You supporting that other Brooklyn kid running for president?
Which one is that?
Bernie Sanders?
He's great.
So he's your guy?
Yeah.
Is it true you left the country in 1979 because you were worried about what Reagan was going to be like as president of the United States?
Yes.
So you're going to leave the country again if Donald Trump's president of the United States?
I'm too old.
You're too old to leave the country, so you're staying in Somerville? Hey, Al Kooper, it's a pleasure to see you, and it's a pleasure to listen to you, which I do all the time. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Al Kooper, pleasure. Now, I loved talking to Al Kooper. I've been a huge fan forever. But after the interview was over, Al stood up, long silence, and I say, "What's up?" And Al says, "I hated that you asked me about that Dylan thing." I said, "Really?" He says, "No, really. I hated it. I've told it millions of times. Everyone has heard the story and seen the movie. It's No Direction Home. So loving the guy as I do, I said sorry and asked if it was okay if I mentioned this on the show tonight. He said, "I hope you do." So I just did. But to test his notion, I also asked our studio crew afterward if they'd ever heard the story before. Here are their responses.
I've never heard of the story about Like a Rolling Stone.
No, never.
I've never heard that story in my life.
Never heard the story.
No, never have.
But even if they had, Al, we can never hear it enough. The great Al Kooper. Time now for tomorrow's Globe. Tonight, your first look at Thursday morning's Boston Globe with city editor Stephen Smith. Hello there, Steve. What's on page one?
Good evening, Jim. It was a heartbreaking case that raised a disturbing question. How could a mother deprive her own child of life-saving cancer medication? The case of Kristen Labrie read like a made-for-TV drama, but it was all too real. A jury, of course, convicted Labrie, holding her responsible for the death of her 9-year-old son. Today, the state's highest court reversed that ruling, saying that Labrie deserves a new trial. The Supreme Judicial Court said that she had been deprived of effectual legal counsel during her trial.
What else is you featuring tomorrow, Steve Smith?
So, Jim, how many of us remember sleepwalking through high school? For me, it was honors algebra. Freshman year, Sister Nancy Reynolds rapping me on the knuckles when I fell asleep. Educators, parents, and students have long recognized the deleterious effect of going to bed too late, waking up too early. And now a growing number of Massachusetts schools are watching what's happening at Nauset Regional High School on the Cape. The administrators there decided a few years ago to stop ringing the first bell at 7:25. Now students begin classes at 8:35. And the results are pretty striking. Tardiness has declined precipitously, and the number of D's and F's have been cut in half.
I love that. Steve Smith, thanks so much. See you tomorrow. So Canada's new Prime Minister comes to the U.S. tomorrow, just days after politely calling his neighbors to the South to task for our parochialism.
I just felt like it might be nice if they paid a little more attention to the world. So having a little more of an awareness of what's going on in the rest of the world, I think is what many Canadians would hope for Americans.
Ouch. But let's face it, he's right. Know who Trudeau's predecessor was? Neither did I. Stephen Harper. Think Canadians know who Barack Obama's predecessor was? Of course. And it's not just our closest neighbor. We know nothing virtually about the world. But even on the other side of the world, they're talking about what we're talking about. They're talking about our elections. A week or so ago, I spoke to Marco Werman and Matthew Bell. They'd just gotten back from Tehran.
Several different people brought up Donald Trump without us prompting and said, basically, what's the deal with Donald Trump? And we said, well, isn't he entertaining? And don't worry, he won't be elected president. And then they said, yeah, that's what we said about Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
Iran's current leader? I didn't think so. Hassan Rouhani. By every measure, frightening. Remember back in 2008 when President Obama or Barack Obama said this?
It's embarrassing when Europeans come over here. They all speak English, they speak French, they speak German. And then we go over to Europe and all we can say is merci beaucoup.
15% of Americans speak more than one language. Le livre est sur la table. That's about it for me. On the other hand, 56% of Europeans are multilingual. And are we even curious? A third of Americans only hold passports. 60% of Canadians do. 80% of Brits. So, what's the bottom line? The new Prime Minister of Canada is onto something. But what's his name again? What do you think? Email us, tweet us, share your thoughts. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. We're going to recap tonight's Democratic debate and look ahead to tomorrow's GOP showdown. It is endless. That and more, that's tomorrow at 7. One more thing before we go. Kelly Beatty of Sky and Telescope magazine talked last night right here about that solar eclipse in Indonesia. Look at this. If you missed it on their site, here it is. A little faster than the people of Indonesia saw it happen. The next solar eclipse, as Kelly told me last night, anyone on this planet will see, will be August of 2017. And one more thing, my last word, I promise. Our many thanks to Catherine Farley, whose last night with us on the show is tonight. Catherine, we'll miss you. Coming up, your chance to help us bring you the news. In an election cycle, having an independent news source is vital. Perhaps never more than now. You can support Greater Boston and everything else you see and hear on GBH. Stay tuned for more.